Each year, the Institute for Supply Management honors an outstanding individual in the supply management profession with a J. Shipman Gold Medal Award. Johnson Shipman was a purchasing agent for the Neptune Meter Company in New York. A pioneer member of the New York affiliate of the National Association of Purchasing Agents, Shipman gave liberally of his time and counsel. Following his death in 1929, the Shipman Medal was established to commemorate the contributions of this modest, retiring man known for his vision, intellect, and influence on important issues. For more than 80 years, the Shipman Medal has been presented to individuals whose modest, unselfish, sincere, and persistent efforts have advanced the field of supply management. J. Shipman Gold Medal Award committee members review numerous nominations, each heralding professionals of the highest caliber. Shipman medalists join an exclusive class of professionals, innovators, community leaders, mentors, and teachers involved at all levels of the organization, each remembered for their distinguished service towards the cause and advancement of the profession they love. And now, the Institute for Supply Management is proud to announce this year's J. Shipman Gold Medal Award recipient.
Fellow supply managers, I am pleased to announce our 2012 J. Shipman Gold Medal Award winner, Dr. Joe Cavinato. Joe, would you stand?
Thank you, Norbert, and thank you, ISM, and the entire community. I'm flattered and very much honored. But the prime thing that attracted me to this field, what I saw early in my career, was the opportunities for improvement, for change, for the people in the field, and for their companies. And I became passionate at an early in it. And when we look at where we came from, the field of purchasing really just arrived at the beginning of the Industrial Revolution about 150 years ago in Germany and England, but the field was a flat line for over 100 years. In fact, it was even more than that. It was really just people wanting something, and they went out and got it. They got on a horse and then went out and got it. The real positive change started in our field in the 1980s. If you look back, in fact, at the NAPM annual conference booklets that I found at the ISM one day, it's quite an archaeological record because the patterns started to evolve in the early 80s. In the early 80s, it was quality. About a third of this annual meeting was things on quality, and Japan was teaching the world how to do it correctly. And it was in the mid-80s, it was the pattern was how purchasing people can convince their management and people in other departments how great they were. And it was hard. And a lot of people, and the NAPM sponsored me in a study to go out and look in many companies to find out those companies that the magazines were saying were really great purchasing departments, what were they doing? And compare them to everybody else. And I found that there were very few differences. And I wasn't finding anything, that everybody was using the same measures to show how great they are in their annual performances. And there wasn't any distinction between the good ones and the ones that weren't. And about halfway through it, Ed Bierman, who used to work for the NAPM as the director of education, said, maybe it's in the soft measures. So I went back and I went to companies without companies knowing that I was doing a purchasing study. I just went and approached them and said, I'm here to look at the way departments interact with each other. And so I asked, I would talk to engineering people, marketing people, operations people, finance people, and all. And I would talk about what their interactions were and what the good, bad, and ugly types of things were. And what a psychologist friend told me, he said, the real question you want to ask it as though it is not a question that doesn't really matter. And so the last question that I asked always was, well, gee, you guys, you haven't mentioned a purchasing department in our 20 minutes here. What about it? And he said, look at their face and look at their body reactions. And what I found was, and then naturally I would then ask them, what was it about it? Well, what I found then was the ones that regarded their purchasing departments highly, it was all soft things. It wasn't the hard measures. In fact, in some cases, they were departments that were really struggling with the official measures that the auditors were looking for. But there were 5 things that seemed to be a pattern there. And number one is first, and I asked them, what is it about that CPO? What is it about that department? The 5 things that I found fairly early is that, first of all, they all talked about the CPO and the people as model business managers, that they thought business first, and then it was purchasing and procurement second. Secondly, that they were able to gain access for these people inside suppliers, to find engineering problems and operational problems and such. And the third thing was that they were a partner in their own performance, that they helped them in succeeding for what they and their departments were trying to do. And then fourthly, they were a problem solver. And then lastly, they were an oracle. That they were people who, when they had conversations with them, they were talking about things that what was going to come next, or what were the things that were going to help them, or what would be some problem things. 1990s, it was the rage of strategic sourcing. Mid-90s, cross-functional teaming. It was an amazing delta of change in this field that had happened from the 1980s and 1990s. And it was all about value add. It was all about doing things much better. But if you look at it, it was basically doing what we do better. We were still doing the same things, but we were doing them a little differently and a little better. In the 2000s, where we are today, this pace of change has accelerated. And it started to be, the things started influencing us in the early 2000s were things that were outside the traditional box of what we are and who we are. Low-cost sourcing, for example, globalization, outsourcing, just to name a few that were outside our traditional box. There was an article in the Sunday New York Times about a year ago by David Pogue, who's the New York Times technology editor, and he wrote this piece about the decade of 2000s, and he said, in this decade, we have come to market things that had never existed before in our lives and in businesses. HD TV, Blu-ray, GPS, Wi-Fi, Gmail, Skype video, YouTube, iPod, iPhone, iPad, Kindle, Xbox, Wii, Facebook, Twitter, online music stores, streaming movies. These were just in the 2000s. And you look at our field in this decade, the 2000s were not just doing procurement better, but it was really doing things differently. Things like now, business risks. And we had a fantastic session on just what Cisco is doing as quite a landmark for that. And new product revenues, being upfront in the innovation process, end-to-end the scope of supply chains, or looking at your companies having many different supply chains, and in fact, many hybrid ones. You see a lot of companies that are returning to Europe and returning to North America with making things that need faster response to markets that we can't stand to have 2 to 3 months reaction to when they're 6,000 to 7,000 miles away. CSR. And also, too, what we started to notice in the Center for Strategic Supply Leadership is CPOs, when we ask them at times, what do you want to be after this job? And many of them said, I want to be a CEO. And that is starting to happen, and I predict that in this decade we're going to see more of that. And also, too, we're seeing, at the very first, we're seeing CPOs taking some responsibilities of what COOs had been traditionally. This is amazing what our field has been doing, and it's a huge delta for the field. But where are we headed? When we look at 2020 and look back to this year, just 8 years from now, there are 3 things that I see kind of on the horizon. That everything is accelerating even faster in this decade. But the sources of change are going to be on us, are going to be more from outside our companies, in our markets, and the changes will be more sudden and more dramatic. The 3 of them, excuse me, is that some of the change is already here, and some of them are just sprouts on the landscape that are coming. One example of a thing that I predict is going to be a major change is 3-dimensional printing. Three-dimensional printing is, people are able to create things that had never been able to be built before because it makes things differently. It doesn't use extrusion, it does not use injection molding, it does not use regular assembly, but it is making things that are already beginning to be what may be groundbreaker applications in medical devices and in high-tech engineering and a lot of things in aerospace. And this is not in Silicon Valley. The center of the universe happens to be New York City, of all places, and it's not. And so yes, we are having some manufacturing come back to the United States and North America, but it's not going to be the big factories of memory. It's going to be very different. And with three-dimensional printing, for example, it's a blend of engineering, IT, and creativity. Three areas that rarely ever together, and yet here is just a new paradigm that we're going to see. A second thing is going to be more unpredictable dynamics from the marketplace, world events, faster reactions, and also to our CEOs and our senior managements wanting us to react even faster to things. I predict that the effect on our field is going to be even more of people looking for our opportunities and look for more in a forward scan of marketplace intelligence of what are the dangers and what are the things that are on the next mountain that we, in the years past we used to just wait for it to happen. We didn't until it did, and then we reacted to it. I think we're going to be changing in our profession here more into proacting around the risks and be more of a source of opportunities for our companies. And then that this demands, though, a different mindset on our part, that we're not just going to be looking at what we did last quarter and how we're going to make the end of this year go, but it actually is going to require us to have mindsets and behaviors of looking forward. And I hear more and more CEOs telling me that, what do you want out of your people? And more of them say, I need people who are predictive for me. Because the world, I can't see all the world, they see a lot of the world, and especially procurement people, they say they've got eyes, ears, and antennas that are even stronger than many marketing and sales people have, and I need to tap into that. I need to know what are possibilities that are coming down the pike, and what are the dangers that we may work for. So I see many of these new deltas. The third thing is I see many of these new deltas coming from people who have attended this meeting and are attending this meeting, people in this room. And the other thing, too, about this field that I'm so excited about, even more so, is that it is really beginning to attract the best and brightest out of schools. And that is our opportunity. I mean, just look at the Richter Scholars, for example. I see a whole lot more of them, even at Thunderbird. Students who did not even expect to know, people who didn't even know how to spell procurement, by the end of the semester, they want to get jobs in it. And they happen to be the best and brightest in the class. And that is something that I've not seen before in many years. So these people are the ones that are going to be changing our landscape in the next decade or so. All fields flux. Most grow, some flatten, some stagnate and shrink, and some that are coming that were not even here a decade ago. But it's the good ones, it's the ones with energy and brain power that make a difference. I'm optimistic that we're going to see more Gene Richters in our field, more Dave Nelsons, more Warren Norquist, and also there's Scions, like people like Sid Johnson and Aaron Dent, okay? That we are growing our own of people who are business people first, and then they're procurement people second. So this is where I see the field where it was, where it is, and where it seems to be going. But what about ourselves, lastly, that I'd like to share with? I did 937 companies, and a hallmark of every growing field is when people are not satisfied with just being good at what they're doing, not being good at what is. The growing fields attract energy for change and energy for growth, and we are that field. We are that kind of a field today. Of the 6,600 people that I've interviewed, I have in my head and on lists my favorite 10%. And it's been 22 years, so a lot of people aren't here with us anymore on this planet. But they're the things that I've noticed about the people who are the ones I'm impressed with, and the ones who are high performers, and the ones who help build their people and their departments and their growth, is that, and even people not even in our field, but the one hallmark is they constantly look outside their job, they look outside their department, they look outside their field, they look outside their company, and they look outside their industry. And they translate what they see and they synthesize that for what it means for others. And that, to me, is the core of true leadership, of where when you're in a position to have eyes, ears, and antennas on things that the rest of your company does not have, and you bring that in and you say, hey, here's some things that what it means for you. Maybe that can help you, or here's a danger that we perhaps saw out there. So be a predictor for others in your company, and connect the dots that you see, and take a true leadership role in helping connect those dots for other people. So in summary, it really boils down to 6 words that I'd like to share with you. Is be a leader for what is possible. And you are in a fantastic position to do it. This is the greatest time in history to be in this field. And it's accelerating and expanding and getting deeper as time goes on. And just the last thing I'd like to share with you is my father gave me 2 great truisms of advice. Is find something to be passionate about, which I did. And I see a lot of that in this field today. And the second thing he told me is, be sure to marry a girl who is smarter than you. And I did. Again, thank you very much.